So welcome to session 3 of Creating a Buzz About Bees in Ontario. Just for those of you who are joining for the first time tonight, my name is Karen Fisher, and I'm an economic development advisor with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. And my colleague Carolyn Peterbow and I have been working with the Ontario Beekeepers Association to deliver this 4-part series and on creating a buzz about bees in Ontario. And it's basically geared towards providing some insight and information on how to get your product moving on sale, selling in Ontario. And we've had a lot of really interesting guest speakers so far, just talking about the kinds of activities that they've done in their business cycle. We had a great presentation from our colleague last week on costing and pricing. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's session, where we're going to hear again from an OMAFRA colleague, Kelly Ward, and also from some beekeepers to talk about their approaches to marketing. Mel, are you on yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay. So perhaps I can turn it over to you for a land acknowledgement, please.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Although today's meeting is provided in an online setting, I would like to take this time to recognize the prevailing relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. These traditional territories predate the earliest European colonies, including those in my family who immigrated here from the Netherlands. The communities we live in are located on the historic grounds of numerous nations across this land, and I am humbled to live and work on these lands. The office of the Ontario Beekeepers Association, who I work for, resides within the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I recognize this land as being home and traditional territory to other Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. This territory extends across the greater Golden Horseshoe region in southern Ontario, from the Rouge River Valley in the east and across to the headwaters of the Thames River in the west, and from the shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario in the south to the headwaters of the Nottawasaga River in the north. I am appreciative of the ancestors who cared for this land, defended it, and protected its waters. These guardians continue to uphold the ecosystems, historical sites, and spiritual places that we are privileged to visit today and for years to come. But I am still learning. Through this territorial acknowledgement, I recognize those who cared for this land that are now this land that is now caring for us, and to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. Please consider how we can each, in our own way, go forward with awareness and reconciliation. And thank you.
Thank you very much for those words. I'm pleased also to welcome Kelly Ward, who is with Foodland Ontario, to speak to us tonight. And Kelly's going to talk a little bit about, the consumer trends that they see as Foodland. And Kelly, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself. So I'll just pass it over to you.
So my name's Kelly, and I'm the team lead with the Foodland Ontario program. And I work with all areas of our program to help highlight how we can help promote local food in Ontario. And part of what we've done is some consumer behavior research that we use to inform some of our marketing efforts. But we like to share that to other people as well, because it can also help you make some decisions in how you target your marketing. So trying to share that in a usable format for you tonight, and just kind of go over some high level insights that we have, but we can dig in further wherever needed. And then we're just going to wrap up with a bit of an overview of what the Foodland Ontario program is all about and how we can help you if you use our logo, and sort of building on some of our brand strengths. So just a quick overview on some of the challenges that we've been seeing in the food space. Normally when we do research it's valid for a few years unless there's a major shift in food buying, which is fair to say that we've seen. So we did see situations where there was oversupply or shortages on shelves various times throughout the year. And then we know that food businesses were impacted through temporary lockdowns and restrictions that caused a significant reduction in sales, or having to divert how you were promoting. If you, for example, sold into restaurants, you had to find other avenues to move food. And that we know that these closures and restrictions impacted you. And we also know that there was also other production challenges going on, just with consumer trust, let's say. Just these are a high level look at some of the, let's say, brand measurement stats that we look at for Foodland Ontario. And what we did see is that more Ontarians were reporting that they always try to buy local food over imported food. And we think that that was a little bit in relation to the pandemic. There was a sort of an uptick in looking for local food and supporting the people in your community to try to help everyone kind of get through that hard patch. And we did see that 76% of consumers agreed that now more than ever, we need to buy local. So that's setting us up for a good spot to be in terms of promoting to people who want to buy local. Consumers have renewed their focus, and they report that 82% realize now that shopping locally is a great way to support our recovery post-pandemic. So in general, even sort of when we did this research in 2021, we were seeing increased price sensitivity and concern about rising food costs. And this was really ahead of the major jump that we saw in inflation. So we've been seeing increased price sensitivity from as far back as like 2015, 2016 when we did research. So we can just, build on that, assume that since last year when we did this research, it's even more a concern and top of mind for people. For Foodland Ontario, we know that almost 90% of all food buyers in the province recognize our logo, which is higher than a lot of brands in the food space, and like even more recognizable than the Ontario Trillium, in fact. And then we know that 86% of grocery shoppers intend to purchase fresh Ontario food. So that's, people are saying, they have a propensity to buy. We know that sometimes there's a disconnect, and we can talk about the reasons why, but people may say, I plan to buy local, and that's at least getting a leg up on helping them to actually land that decision to actually buy local. We know that from a Foodland perspective, people are more likely to buy local if they've seen our advertising. So that we've seen that come up in surveys where we've asked them, if they plan to buy local, then we show them, have you seen this commercial? And we ask them again, and definitely that recall helps to drive that intent. And we did see in 2021, people more likely to buy local. We noticed that 32% of consumers noted they're buying more Ontario food than last year. So in 2020 even, they were buying more than they had previously. So people were definitely making an effort. And, from a target segment size, I'll get into that on the next couple slides, but just we have seen a reduction in a reluctant category, which is definitely a strong indicator too that the number of reluctant shoppers has declined. So it's really meaning that people are more receptive to the idea right now. So this is sort of Ontario consumers at a glance. And I'll try to break this down for you and help you make some sense of this. But essentially, all the consumers in Ontario, we've kind of put them into these different categories. And the ones that are, that we have at Hello are, I don't know, that gets to this side of the screen. So where you see the plus. So these are the converted folks. And we know that this blue category and the purple category, the principled, affluent, local enthusiasts and established patriotic traditionalists, these people you have at Hello. They are strong supporters. They feel a responsibility to buy local. They do place importance on that. They tend to be more interested in wholesome eating. One category is a little bit more price sensitive than the other. And they're more likely to cook meals at home, for example. So we also do see a strong connection with rural communities falling into these categories. In the center lanes, this is where Foodland Ontario focuses, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then on the far side, where you have the yellow category, the on-the-go convenience-oriented suburbanites, and the pessimistic, disengaged, frugal consumers. These are mouthful names for them, but these folks are more difficult to reach. They're harder to convince to buy local, either because they're very price sensitive and they think that buying local is more expensive, or they might shop at a convenience store, for example, where finding a local option may be more challenging. So this group is more expensive to market to, because you have to work harder to convince them, right? So Foodland, what we do is a little different, because we market, or we influence social change, essentially. So we're trying to convince people to move from this fence sitter position in the middle, these ambitious, health-conscious urbanites and receptive, value-driven consumers, making up 28% of all of food buyers in Ontario. My goal is to shift them into the converted categories. So if I do what we need to do well, then there's more people in this converted category, making it easier to connect with. So food buyers may not have the same, food producers may not have the same targets that I do, because they may want to talk to the people who are already interested, right? You don't have to work as hard because they're already looking. You just have to help them find you. There is value in speaking to these fence sitters, because you also may be able to sway them across. So it's just a matter of picking, the target that makes the most sense for you. And we do have lots of data on each of these individual categories. If you do need that, definitely reach out to either myself or Carolyn or Karen, and we can help line that up with you. It's a lot of overwhelming data to give to people all at once. So it's helpful if you kind of can help narrow down what you're looking for. And go to the next slide. So you're going to see a lot of these charts tonight, and I just want to help you interpret them. I've given the deck to be shared after the presentation, and you'll be able to dig into this afterwards and really sort of look at the results that we saw from the research that make sense for who you're trying to target. So I'm going to talk just in general about consumers tonight. So that's this total column, I guess. So this is, on average, what consumers say. But you can also see in the table the different segments, and these correspond with, if I can go back, these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see specifically the responses, to the target that you're most interested in, if you want to dive in further on your own. So essentially what we know is, and this hasn't really changed, is that the top factors for making a purchase decision is freshness, price, healthfulness, safe, and how it looks. So these are the main things that you're looking for. And, you know, I think many of these are just sort of like a baseline assumption at this point. Like, we expect our food to be safe. That's not going to convince me to buy it because I expect it to be safe across the board. So where you can sort of demonstrate added value is when you get kind of down a little bit into this table here and see, you know, appearance to some extent, but concern about presence of pesticides, food additives. Is it locally grown or produced? Which, yes, it is. Are you doing this in a responsible way? Does it have a long shelf life? Which, you know, you guys definitely have that advantage. And, you know, then you get down into where, you know, half of consumers are concerned with ethical production or familiarity with the producer themselves. Organic production in general is like only 30% of consumers are looking for that. So certain segments value that very highly, but generally speaking, that's not the key driving factor. So the intent when you're looking at a table like this is to look at these factors that people think about when they're going to make a purchase decision and say, how can you market using this language to convince them? Because these are the words that they're looking for when they make these decisions. Propensity to purchase Ontario grown in the future. So we do ask, are you likely to buy Ontario food? And we see the vast majority, 86%, almost 90% say, yes, I'm likely to do so, which is good news. It means it's easier to sway them because they're already coming looking. And then 3% are not likely. Now, does that actually translate? We don't know because we don't have, you know, the sales figures. So we can just sort of say that as long as they have the intent, they're more likely to buy local. Now, the next two slides, I've taken a bunch of these tables that I've shown you, and I've kind of packed them into 2 slides just for the sake of time. But I did give you the detailed tables in the appendix of this presentation, so you can refer to them later. But what I'm showing you is sort of the top factors and the bottom factors. So the top ones being in the middle column, and the ones that are less likely to convince a consumer in the far column in the pinky red color. So why is buying local important to you? We constantly hear it supports local farmers, it supports my local economy, and it's fresh. So people are getting that helping your neighbors message, which has changed, I think, more in the past few years. People are definitely seeing the value of that. They're not necessarily top of mind thinking about hygienic production, variety. Those are assumed. So it may not, they may not specifically say, but this is definitely still top of mind. But using those that language in your marketing may not be as effective. Factors motivating the purchase of Ontario versus an imported product. Again, that fresh, quality, healthful is the top, and then less is affordable, organic, and the presence of pesticides or additives. So they assume that Ontario does it better than what's coming in from elsewhere. Reasons that they say they may lack purchase intent or they may not be willing is price. They're going to buy whatever's cheap. They may not see what's available in the grocery store. And then, seasonal availability is obviously something that some food categories can't do much about, or it depends on freshness. So impact on purchase intent. This is things that influence purchase intent. So if it were a cheaper option, I would definitely be more likely to buy local. If it were fresher, if I knew it was benefiting a local farmer. And things that have a lesser impact on that decision is if I could find it easier in restaurants, if it was easier to identify when buying groceries online, or if I knew the farm it was produced at. So that's the one that's a bit of an outlier, because they do want to know that it's helping the local farmer, but it's not the key aspect of influencing, is knowing who the farmer is themselves. Attitudes towards local food. This is just sort of a general perception question that we ask. And people think that local food is fresher because it's not coming from as far away. I think people remember old commercials that Foodland did where it showed food moving over a long distance, and that one has definitely stuck with people. They have respect for local farmers, benefits the economy, and they're seeing it more in stores. So that's somewhere where we feel that our logo can really help. Other attitudes around local is they prefer takeout, they prefer to buy organic, and they want to see a reduction in environmental impact. So these things are still important to people. They're just on the farther end when it comes to local food. For eating habits, we're still seeing that people eat together as a family. They recognize that it's about time we got back to more wholesome eating. And we also see a bit of meal prep behaviors coming through in eating habits, because they're busy through the week and they want to prepare so that they can just make something quickly. And then sort of to a lesser degree, I'll eat takeout through the day because I know I'm going to eat nutritious at dinner time. I think the concern about eating fast food all the time is overrated, or there isn't a convenient place nearby to buy local food. So we're just going to get into some tables again. So this we asked, how does your local food purchases now compared to a year ago? And we were seeing 61% said I'm buying the same amount. 32 were saying I'm buying more. And only 8% were saying they were buying less from Ontario. So that's definitely a good news story. And like you can see, it's pretty consistent across the board with all targets that people were buying less. But where the numbers are highest is that convenience, really price sensitive category where they may be trying to cut back and save money. Some people are interested to know what household spending on food looks like. So in general, we asked, how much does your household spend on groceries? And so some people were saying, $0 to $200 per trip, $200 to $400, $400 to $600, and then over $600. These are getting into, I think, a monthly spend. So generally speaking, again, it's sort of consistent when you look at it as an aggregate number, but when you break it out by the segments, you can sort of pick off the more price sensitive targets that are spending a little less. They're looking to save a little bit more money when they go shopping. Perception on food prices compared to a year ago versus 5 years ago. Compared to a year ago, people were thinking that they're spending more, 40%. So almost half were saying, compared to a year ago, I'm spending more. And 60% are saying I'm definitely spending more than I was 5 years ago. And I would think that, again, with some of the increases that we've seen in the last year, these numbers would maybe even be a little higher. We like to share too, like, where do people shop? So we do see, again, this may be tied to the price sensitivity that we've been seeing, but large chain grocery stores and discount grocery stores and warehouse club stores are highly used. And then we also see, department stores, independent grocery stores, farmer markets, or directly from the farmer. An ethnic grocery store, so like a specialty market. online grocery retailers or an online recipe meal box retailer. So this sort of breakdown is, you can again see kind of by segment how those change. Of the people who are shopping in grocery stores, we did ask them to name their preferred locations that they shop. So again, no surprise, we're seeing No Frills and Walmart Supercenter and Food Basics kind of in the top. And those again are due to price sensitivity that we've been seeing. And then, you know, we have kind of everything through from Costco, Loblaws, Zehrs, independent groceries, Fortinos, those kinds of things. Fortinos is obviously not as widely distributed across the province, so we would expect that number to be a little bit lower as well. And this question was again just another eating preference type question. Where are you eating? And again, majority are still eating meals cooked at home. And you know, again, that changes based on the target, but the trend is pretty consistent across all of the segments as to what the breakdown is, but the majority are still overwhelmingly cooking at home. We asked, where do you get information on food and nutrition? And so the majority are people will look for that online, either through a Google search or a source that they know online. And then we see friends and family, so that referral pattern. So a lot of social media can really leverage here because you can kind of build that trust and the sharing aspect. TV is still watched and still influences. So people do learn about food through watching TV commercials. We do see online communities in terms of, this is more of the blogs or forums where people are actually actively having conversations. And then sort of to a lesser degree, we see, you know, magazines. So the print consumption has declined. So that's the quick overview of the, you know, the top level of the research. We could dive in as much as you need to. But I just wanted to give you a quick overview on the Foodland Ontario program and what we do and how we can help. So we've sort of broken all of our activities up. I just need to, there. We create demand for local, and we do that through our advertising, which is sort of that mass reach where we sort of convince people that this is what you need to do, or remind them that the local food option exists and they should be looking for it when they shop, or asking for it if they don't see it. We use our social media and our digital media channels just to keep the conversation going. We inspire people through recipes that we share, or just remind them that this new food is in season, or this is a new and different way you can try your favorite foods that are available year round. And we answer questions that people have. We kind of position ourselves as like a friend in the kitchen. And so that has tremendous reach for us as our social media. Then we also do public relations, where we have spokespeople go out onto different news channels like News at Noon or breakfast television type thing, and they do a little quick demo about what they could cook with local food. And then we also do things like a calendar each year, where each month you get a new recipe to try. We also make sure that people can identify the logo. So we've promoted it, but we also want to make sure that people are building that connection between the advertisement that they saw and the food product to know it's local. So by having the Foodland Ontario logo on package, you've got 90% of consumers that recognize that brand, and it really helps them to sort of build that connection and think, yes, this is the one that I'm looking for. And then we also work with different retail activity. We have merchandising reps that go out into like grocery stores across the province and make sure that there's point of sale material or identifying the local options as much as possible. And then we also do different partnering opportunities with, the agricultural stakeholders. We do local food week promotion, agriculture week promotion. So next week is agriculture week in the province. So we'll be doing an extra drumbeat of activity for local food. And we've also done some healthy eating programming. So almost 1,800 businesses currently use logo on packaging or other marketing activity that they do. So we do know that the strongest driver for consumers to purchase Ontario food is at the shelf. So seeing that logo helps them to make that choice when they see it. And I've just included the link here. If you are interested in using the logo, it's a pretty easy process. You just complete a logo use agreement with us. We provide you the logo and how to use it. And, then we try to promote those companies that are also partnering with us with their logo. So I can, get into the details on specifically what we're doing for advertising and things, but I wanted to allow some time for questions. I did provide it in the appendix. You can kind of flip through and see in detail what our most recent campaigns are generating and some of the things that we've been working on. I also have been responsible for the Foodland social, so I'm happy to riff on any of that as well. If that helps.
Thanks, Kelly. We did have a couple of questions in the chat that maybe we can start with.
Okay.
And if anyone else has any more questions for Kelly, feel free to unmute, join the conversation or pop something into chat. So Michaela was asking, and you touched on it, whether there are rules for using the logo, or can anyone who produces food in Ontario use it? So, I know you did touch on that, but maybe you can expand a little bit. And, I know, and I've worked with people through the process, it's not onerous, but there is a process, right?
Yeah. It basically, you just have to demonstrate that it's a product of Ontario to us and that it meets the food definitions for Ontario. And there's an agreement that you sign that basically just acknowledges the intent that it's meant to be used. And we kind of have to go through an approval process on our end. But once you've submitted that form, we give you all the materials and you're able to order point of sale materials for us. So we have things like flags, price cards, base wrap, things like that you could use in on-farm market situations or farmers market situations, just to sort of draw attention, and those are all free of charge.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, so I saw the question about Walmart being considered a department store. It is. So would like Giant Tiger, because that is also a department store that has a grocery aisle in it.
And Carolyn asked if you could talk about the social media following that Foodland has and the different channels that you use.
Sure. So currently we use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and to some degree YouTube. Facebook continues to be our dominant channel, and I know that's not the case for everyone, but that's still sort of the big hitter for us. We've got an audience size of about 175,000 followers. And on Instagram, it's our newest channel, and we have about 28,000 followers on that one. And Twitter has been sort of our consistent, we don't see huge growth with it each year, but it's sort of our little engine that could. And it's around 28, 30 as well. And Pinterest is a little smaller in terms of actual followers, quite a bit smaller, but we do see conversion through Pinterest. So people actually kind of flip through, they save our recipes. And when we look at our website data, we definitely see, that traffic being, shepherded from Pinterest to our website. So we know that people are clicking on those links. They tend to save their favorite recipes and put them in a virtual little cookbook for themselves. And and then refer to them back later. So those are kind of how we use our channels currently. We do leverage a lot of paid advertising. We can get, just in the last 6 months, I think, combined on all channels, we've got about, 35, 40 million impressions, kind of through a combination of organic and paid advertising. So, yep. And I'm seeing the question about recipe cards and books that use honey products. We have the little booklets. We have point of sale materials. Those are all available free of charge once you have a logo agreement with us, and you can just order them online from us.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for sharing so much information. And as you said, there's an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and take a closer look at some of the numbers that you provided. And there's more information, as you said, in the appendix, which will be circulated to everyone. The whole presentation will be circulated to everyone. So, thank you for joining us tonight and sharing all that. And it's, a pleasure to see you,
Nice to see
even
you.
if it is virtually. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So up next on our agenda is, what we wanted to do was to provide some really great examples of different marketing approaches that people are using, to their success, to the success, to speak to the success of their company and their business. And so we have Dave Stotesbury and Luke Peters who are going to join us. So Dave, I think we'll start with you. And, thank you very much for being here tonight with us and sharing your story. And I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you. Actually, thanks, Kelly. I was just, you kind of triggered something there. I remember growing up, we were definitely a Foodland Ontario calendar family. So there was always one in the kitchen, and I don't know how many recipes Mom made, and they're all good, but anything Mom made was pretty good. So it's kind of brought that back. It's been a year or two since we've had a calendar up in our house there. But anyway,
sorry, can I just interrupt for a second? Do you remember the jingle?
Oh, Good Things Grow in Ontario. Oh yeah, I don't have a singing voice, but I remember it.
Yeah, I was going to sing it, but I won't share. But that was very, very something that it still sticks in my head, right? Is the Foodland jingle.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyways, I do want to thank Mel for organizing this. She had talked to me quite a long time ago about this. And it's great to have a little bit of ability to kind of talk about our story as fairly new players in the beekeeping and honey industry in Ontario here. I founded Backed by Bees with my partner Vincent Soa back in 2018, so not too long ago. We had the joy of kind of starting everything up and then getting right into COVID and having to make some pretty big changes when it came to production and marketing, obviously all with COVID there. But what we really did was Vince and I wanted to start a brand that really connected people to nature. And so we really did think primarily at the beginning, agnostic of beekeeping, agnostic of honey and bees and meat, as we can kind of chat about in a bit. What we really just wanted to do was bring natural products, bring nature to, sort of the urbanized population and just let them experience that and just get them closer and closer connected to that. So fundamentally, that's what Backed by Bees kind of really started as. And then operationally, I have a fair background in beekeeping. I did start at the University of Guelph, the Honeybee Research Center there. I'm fairly tied in with the OBA and actually I am an active board member on the OBA at the present time. But we operate just over 700 colonies in the Halton region. And we also do have some out in Elmira, Waterloo. And that's neck of the woods. That's where I originally started, but the Guelph area is flooded. So I couldn't start moving into too much more territory out there. I'd be starting to step on toes. So, we are fairly local. We really are a nuking operation. So we are a livestock operation. But then also with what Vincent has kind of brought to Back by Bees operationally, being a mead maker, a honey wine producer, a lot of what we also focus on is specific honey production in order to go into our, our honey-based alcohols, our meads there. So we did that. When it kind of came to, how we got our products out there and started to market our products and find some success there. I mean, initially we did get into the online space and really saw that online space through whether it was social media or our web-based platform. Getting our products out there into the mass market. Even though we were really trying to focus on that Halton region, we started in that way. We started with a lot of Facebook ads, a lot of social media campaigns and whatnot, specifically targeting kind of our local area. But found very quickly, as soon as COVID hit and everybody started to go online, they became incredibly, costly. And there was just a lot of noise. So, we did pivot. And so now actually, nowadays our digital presence is there, but is maybe not our primary focus for the time being. In the meantime, what Vince and I did was we took on a venture. I'm just going to share my screen here. And what we did was we actually put up in the north end of Burlington on Humblebee line. So this is a great overview of a drone footage, our shot there that was taken a couple of weeks ago. We really focus on getting more into brick and mortars, knowing that a lot of our educational component of what we do, what the brand stands for, and behind our products, it's going to be a lot easier, face to face if we can get those customers and those consumers in the door. I mean, we'd have the ability to actually get out there and educate them on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we ended up putting up a production and retail facility. Actually, we reuse, shipping containers and put up a fairly, unique building in the north end of Burlington there, and have created on a 4-acre plot. So we leased 4 acres off a functioning hay farm in the north end of Burlington there, but have a bit of an agritourism play in the sense that we have guided pollinator pathway that loops around our leased area with our full-scale commercial bee yard sitting underneath a big, beautiful old oak tree at the back. And so, we really focus on having the ability to do this because, we find that consumer who has the ability to make that connection of, that honey actually comes from those bees back there. I mean, even though we have multiple other yards, that is the kind of consumer notion that, they can see the legitimacy of it. They can make that connection immediately right there. We knew how important that was. And so we struck out on that. We've been in this building for just a little bit over a year. We started in this little yellow shipping container way back at the back. And so, from a marketing perspective, when we started to look around at, areas that we wanted to put up a facility, we knew that, one of the immediate wins we could tackle right off the bat was, getting into an area where there was a lot of road traffic. And so instead of having to spend, huge amounts of money on digital marketing and whatnot to drive people to us, we could rely on, for the first little bit anyways, a lot of road traffic and just a lot of eyes on the facility itself. That's also why it's bright yellow. The little yellow building on Humblebee, you can't quite miss it when you drive by now. People are still learning what it is, but they at least know that the building's there. So that's kind of, the real start to there. So, we've definitely shifted away a little bit from the digital side of things, and moved in a lot more kind of that brick and mortar and that retail. We've up into this point, I mean, most of our production we've been able to, sell through our own location. We do have some wholesale relationships, but now that we've kind of scaled up to beekeeping operation and are starting to see larger honey, honey lots throughout the year. I mean, now we're starting to shift more into events. And so we just kind of did one of our biggest events for the year. We get into a lot of that, Christmas holiday markets, and that's a great place where people, tend to congregate, and they really like getting out to those sorts of events. So, we've really focused on, getting out there and talking to people at a lot of these events in the last little while, not just about, Back by Bees, but why bees. Why bees are important. I mean, we're fairly close to Conservation Halton, who has a particular stance on, honeybees versus native pollinators and that whole story. And so, we just enjoy getting out there and having a chat about our view and why we do what we do and trying to strike balance with Mother Nature there. So, we really focus on that. The biggest thing I think Vince and I would, kind of attribute some success to selling our product out there is twofold. The first one is actually standing ground on, a quality product. And so it was, it was quite traditional for a lot of beekeepers to go out with a liquid honey product. But for years, up until last year, I had never sold a jar of liquid honey in my life. And so we really focused on raw honey production. Getting that into the hands of people who valued that sort of product, and even if they didn't, at least having that conversation with people who are looking for other honey products as to the beautiful thing about raw honey, its uses, and the why and whatnot from there. So we really focus on that. And then the second thing was just educating people on nature and pollination themselves, knowing that we weren't the experts. We just kind of wanted to hold their hand and be their guides on that journey there. So, we focus on that. The meadery was also a big piece of what we did. So, when I think about how we did what we did and how we sell honey, well, I mean, I don't really have to sell honey. I just put it in a barrel and ship it over to Vincent, and he can make a great big batch of mead out of it. So that makes it pretty easy to get rid of a lot of honey that way. So we did, just as kind of COVID took hold in March, a lot of our final licensing came through for our meadery, our honey winery, and it did make it a bit of a struggle to get mead out there. First of all, no one knows what mead is. And if you're a beekeeper and you talk about mead, most people tend to think you have a speech impediment, and, it's not mead. It should have a D or a T for meat. But, we got through that. And now, getting people to understand that, it's what mead entails, and the fact that all mead isn't the same. Some meads can be dry, some meads can be sweet, and playing around with that is something we focus on. So it was a struggle at the start, just because a lot of restaurants obviously were struggling through COVID. The ones that were doing okay were a little bit hesitant to start with a net new product for them, but we're starting to find now that getting out there, building relationships, and doing a lot of kind of neat co-branded sort of brews and whatnot is something we're focusing on, as now we can rely on the attention two brands can get versus just one. So the mead now is really starting to kind of plug away. Again, not spending tons of time on digital assets or social media by any means, but actually getting out there, building relationships, talking to a lot of restaurant owners, vendors, and whatnot from that sort of perspective. So we've struck out in the honey world. We focus on raw honey. We have started to increase a lot of our SKUs in the honey world. So everybody talked me into finally starting to sell some liquid honey. So we have struck out into there. But we do some other neat products. So, we have some specialty honeys that we smoke. We have some specialty honeys, and we do actually ferment honey. Knowing that, you say that to most beekeepers, and that's a bit of a, most would say that fermented honey is not something to deal with. But, we've actually developed a process where you can take honey, forcefully ferment it, so not allow it to naturally ferment, and you can do some pretty amazing things with the flavor profile of it, without making it alcoholic, so making it attainable to the mass market as well, even for those who don't consume alcohol by any point. So we've started to increase our honey SKUs, just to give people more offering, as I know not everybody is interested in raw honey. Some like Kelly had kind of mentioned, I mean, you do have the convenient market there, and so raw honey, especially for somebody who bakes or wants to measure things out in its liquid format, just isn't convenient. So we noticed that fairly I guess early on. I just fought it for a while, but lately we've kind of bolted that on to hit more of the kind of convenience market, so that everybody can kind of play around in that honey world. And so, a few of our other big campaigns that we've been running in the last little while, in order to, sell our honey out there is, we have started to partner with, different businesses like the Burlington Food Bank. So we do, run a campaign each year where people can, purchase a jar of honey at a decreased cost, and that can go to the Burlington Food Bank. We're starting to get into a lot more collaborations with sauce makers or other sorts of products. And that's tends to be a big push for us right now. But to this point, one of the biggest things that we're really focused on is self-distribution. So, scaling the beekeeping operation, the business itself. You can go down a couple different routes. We're really focused on self-distribution right now. So it's a lot of legwork from both Vincent and myself out there, talking to local grocery stores, a lot of farm marketeers and those sorts of places and avenues to get our honey out there. So we're doing that, and then also focused on mead production. So that's a little bit about what we do there at Backed by Bees. I guess the last thing I would like to mention is we also do run a honey share. As demand increases and the ability to produce raw honey is limited, once honey starts to crystallize, I mean, we truly believe that, heating honey to, any degree is just not something we're interested in doing. The raw honey has to all be packaged up, during the harvest there. We do run a hive box or a hive share program where people can, put their name on a certain level of raw honey production, as we tend to, sell out at certain times of the year. So we do that. Melanie, thanks for kind of putting that in the chat. Not so much a honey, or I guess a honey themed thing that we do, but when we think about Backed by Bees, I mean, we really kind of have three different pillars that we operate in. So we have the alcohol portion, we have the beekeeping portion, but we also do run a market that sells a lot of local goods. And so, the way we define local is Ontario, both Vincent and myself. And so, before COVID, we did start with very much a traditional style farm market, as well as putting together boxes that we thought were staples for a lot of, Ontario families' kitchens and in their homes, making sure to put a jar of honey in there to, really put the name on that. Honey, we do think that it'd be great to have honey as a staple in every kitchen, but we do run, a local produce box, a bundle, week over week. It's all seasonal food grown locally. The majority of it comes out from a lot of, Mennonite farms, in the Elmira area. Both Vincent and myself were kind of, from that neck of the woods where we grew up. But that's a big portion. So the joke was when COVID came along and, each wanted to, there was restrictions, whether it was food, whether it was alcohol, or whether it was, agriculture, we were pretty okay that way. We just had to make a lot of adjustments on how we got products out there. So anyways, thank you so much for your time. It's always hard to cram it all in and, get all the main points in there. But yeah, I mean, right now we're really focused on brick and mortar, and we'll expand that over time.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I do find it really interesting. There's so many common threads, but from the first session to the second to the third, and there's a lot of people are very focused on educating, and educating people is, and sort of the natural components of beekeeping and natural environment and all of that. That's really a passion I'm hearing through, the presentations that we've heard so far. So thank you so much. We're going to hold questions. We're going to let our next speaker on, Luke Peters. Luke, thank you so much for joining us, and we're really looking forward to hearing you speak about some of your successes in marketing in your business.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks Melanie for inviting me on. I've been selling selling bees and honey for over a decade now in Ontario, and I started kind of managing about 1,000 colonies for a large operation, and pretty quickly started doing my own small apiary at the same time. I didn't think I was gonna stick around this long in this industry, but I think, you know, for those that are fortunate to work with bees, they are a magnet, and you know, can really kind of draw you in with like just the pure astoundingness of that creature. So and I'm weird enough to be a beekeeper, so I fit right in, I think. Yeah, so my operation primarily focuses on queen production. So we sell mostly bees. That's kind of our main thing. But through the years, we've definitely pivoted a whole bunch. We I manage about 500 colonies right now. That number fluctuates. I know we've had a really rotten year for a lot of beekeepers this past season. It seems to be hit or miss for that. So, man, this was a busy year. It was a put your head down and help people get bees kind of year. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on, and not a whole lot on marketing, which is ever so important. I even started my farm through a business program from province of Ontario, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But it was a great program, Biz Smarts. There's a few businesses that came out of there that I think are still around. And part of that was doing my own market research, which I don't think a lot of beekeepers do. Well, and frankly, you know, if you're keeping bees, you have time for that. But it gave me an early insight into the industry of like where people's heads were at for how they were purchasing honey. And fortunately, we have all that information from Foodland, which is great. I think that is valuable information, and people should follow up with that. And I kind of want to dive right into like one of the things that was brought up, which is, you know, educating people about the product. You know, I always am really moved when I get to like have someone try real honey for the first time and like see how they you know interact with it, right? Especially like, you know, kids that are like, nah, honey's gross, I don't want it, and like whatever, they're brave enough to try it anyway, and they're like, whoa, that's so different. And of course it's like sugar, and it's you know a magical thing of its own. And you know, we've got such a great product here in Ontario. Ontario produces incredible honey. We have such a diversity of plants. We have some really good large agricultural crops that produce good honey. And I think we've got a very good thing here. However, like, you know, our industry is definitely in trouble. You know, COVID definitely threw a curveball at us as a whole. I mean, every industry has had to deal with that in some way. But there's been, of course, major bee losses, which has actually, I think, maybe even helped the industry a little bit. Like, people hear about it, they want to support a local beekeeper. So it's interesting that, you know, it can be a positive to some if you didn't lose your shirt with like losing all your bees. So there has been, you know, any kind of bee news almost helps the honey industry in a way, which is interesting, but it's something that we should not rely on. I mean, we don't want to be getting our marketing from bees dying, right? Like I definitely focus on bee health. That's the thing that I'm very passionate about. And, you know, I would want to make sure that we have a better way to sell honey than having these big losses reported. So education is definitely kind of still put on the beekeepers. For the most part, the Foodland logo, I think, is really easy to get. Like, we've signed up years ago with the Foodland logo, and that's great. The OBA has their own logo. That's great. You know, I think there is a lot of mistrust around honey, and rightfully so. I mean, Canadian honey is part of a Netflix documentary about fake food and, you know, all this stuff. So there is probably more mistrust in our industry than many other industries, and that's tough. You know, when people get to eat, you know, real honey, I think like they get it. There's definitely like I've relied, especially when I was starting out, to let my honey do the talking. You know, I saw the shortage of quality honey on the shelves in my local markets and stuff, and I really just tried to get that honey sampled out as much as possible to share it, and that's a lot of legwork for sure. But you know, since like Canada's had to deal with a lot of fake imported honey for a long time, which has affected our price, and it's definitely affected the trust from the public. So I think though, like, those are really big things, hurdles that we're still dealing with. And I think that, you know, part of the education is like understanding labels, right? I'm happy if someone buys local honey. It doesn't really have to be my honey. I really just want local beekeepers to be supported. And the easiest thing, you know, for that is reading the label. Ontario #1 has to be Ontario honey. It has to be sold in Ontario, and that's a solid and easy thing. And I would really hope that that can be a marketing strategy in the next part of the food literacy section of Foodland Ontario. I think that's well worth it. I actually had a meeting with Foodland Ontario about this a few years ago. You know, I think Kelly left her email in the chat. So I think it's a decent time to bring that back up, because understanding the label of what you're buying will help. And I think knowing for sure that nothing's been imported into the province, right there, Ontario #1, you know, people don't have to change up their labels. They don't have to do anything else, because that's what they're labeling under. I've got some friends that label Canada #1, and it's fully Ontario honey, 100%. And they have the Foodland logo on it. And I think that's a good place for it. It's tough, right? So I think it's really good to, you know, like David was saying, like, have that process of kind of going through the steps, kind of show, if you can show the steps, like that's great. And getting the consumer kind of educated in those ways. So like, yeah, I've built the farm from basically just 2 hives and many years and a lot of work and basically no investment. And you can do that. I don't recommend it. It's not a great way to go about it, for sure. But you can have a lot of fun with it. When, like, if you are starting off, maybe you're early in your brand development, I think have fun with that creation. It's a really awesome time. You know, find a jar of honey that you like in terms of the glass, in terms of the wear, in terms of the label. Like, really have some fun with it. I know the generic stuff is easy, but like, you know, make it your own product. And I think that's what you're going to be really proud of too at the end of the day, and you'll have more energy to kind of promote. And I also am a big collaborator. I really like working with other local businesses, and it's generally quite fun. You know, people that work in the food industry that are doing fun things with you know, wine and beer and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of opportunity selling, you know, honey to kind of jump into all different sections. I'm sorry if you guys hear that. That's my parrot in the background, just having a time. So sorry about that. Yeah, and you know, I think having events is going to be something that will will be more of a thing. I kind of foresaw that we're going to have like way too many events when stuff opens back up, and people are going to go kind of nuts, and there might be some you know, settling out of that. But I'm really happy to bring back like you know, our annual events that we've done. We do run a kind of a festival on the solstice, the winter solstice. It's a celebration of honeybees and mead, and it's a really fun time. There's a lot of events that I really like by organizations I really like that are based on education, maybe it's scientific research and stuff like that. And I do really like supporting that kind of stuff. You know, I support out of province speakers coming in to meetings, you know, paid for Tom Seeley to come down and speak before. And, you know, that's really fun. But I really kind of wanted to make something that's just a celebration of the bees themselves. Like, you know, we do all this work, and, you know, there's all this research being done. And I think we just need to have like a moment to celebrate. And it's also on the winter solstice, which I believe, you know, in my own, you know, belief is like the new year for the honeybees, right? They're using the sun as a calendar, and there's a lot of kind of links there. It's also when typically beekeepers have time to do something else. So it kind of fits in there too. And I also think community is really important, right? It's bringing people together with like-minded, you know, with like minds. And then, you know, we obviously have like honey and like just beeswax candles burning typically. And then, you know, I try to source like local good mead from various brewers, and you know, kind of celebrating like the best of that industry. And yeah, just kind of having a good time. And in the past, it's just been raising money for nonprofits. So it's a little bit crazy that I do all that and I don't take the money, but it's also benefiting like stuff that I just can't do, right? Like I raise money for Wildlife Preservation Canada. They're doing a whole bunch of important work on specific like native bees that are at risk. So I don't do it at work. I love bees. I wish you know, I'm a little bit jealous every time they have the bumblebee rearing job go up every spring. I'm just like, oh, that'd be fun. But you can't do everything. So I support that work because I know that there's really good scientists coming out of that organization too. So basically, yeah, I want to say like, try to do things that you like doing. There's a lot of social media, you know, platforms out there. If you don't understand TikTok, that's okay. Like you don't need to do TikTok. If you're already on Facebook a whole bunch, be on Facebook with your business. Like, you know, start with what you know. And you know, I don't think there's much else that beats like face-to-face interactions with people and like getting out there and getting with your community, which is why events are really good. And that event could be based just around like what, you know, fits best with you. Like we do a plant sale in the spring, and you know, I bring down like, you know, 10 to 20 farmers that I know in the area, and you know, they're really focusing on their plants, which is great. I don't have time to do any of that in the spring, but it's a good time, and it really kind of connects people to, you know, that connection that the bees have, right? They're really connected to the plants, and it's kind of a fun day because you can fit in the education there as well. You know, we can talk about the bees, and generally it works out. I would say that, you know, the goal of both these events really isn't about selling honey, which is, you know, seems kind of weird, but I would have to say that there is probably a benefit in that. And, you know, as running a business, running a farm, you're deciding like what you do and what you care about. So I think if you like stay true to your core beliefs in business and like just, you know, broadcast that in whatever messaging you are using, you know, that's about the best you can do. So I don't want to take up too much time here. Yeah, I think that's okay.
That's great advice, actually, Luke. You know, and one of the things, and you know, just talking about planning again, you know, when I'm working with someone doing, you know, strategic planning of any kind, you know, part of it is identifying what your values are, right, and to remain true to those, right. You know, we have a series of questions here that people have asked in the chat. What is it? What is raw honey? What does the term raw mean?
Yeah, so I mean, personally, I mean that's what we really focused on for years and years and years, and I guess I'll quickly say one thing, you know, that I think isn't kind of inherent in that question, because typically the consumer is really confused between raw and pasteurized, raw and unpasteurized, and liquid and whatnot. You know, those two kind of tend to get, you know, linked together and thrown around. You know, we really stood the ground on raw honey is neither heated at all nor filtered at all. So it's honey that is just extracted, never goes through heat exchange. Any of those sorts of things, sits in a tank, settles out for 24 hours, and then is bottled right from there. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll never repackage honey and consider it raw by any means. I just figure the way honey naturally is what raw is for us.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think there's a legal definition of raw, which is kind of unfortunate. We could use one, I would say, like, and then we'd actually know what it means. It definitely means different things to different beekeepers, and I've definitely seen raw honey on honey that's absolutely not raw, just because, you know, I know the packer, and it is unfortunate. Like, you know, also, like, I'm sure David has to do this too. Like, we have to educate people on, like, crystallization's okay. Like, that's a real thing. I know Billy Bee like never went crystallized, but like, trust me, this is real honey.
That's also kind of a thread that we've heard through the sessions that we've held so far. Just, you know, the point, you know, that educating consumers, right, so that they do understand terms like raw honey and that crystallized is okay, right. And we had a discussion on that at a previous session. So, you know, there is some education, and I think that's partly where, you know, the OBA comes in as an organization, and perhaps the local beekeeping associations that are out there. You know, there's some work that can be done on that. Luke, I wanted to ask you, you have like 10,000 plus followers on Instagram. And so are you like a regular, like a, you know, a regular poster? Like how did that happen?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I was on Instagram fairly early. Yeah, it is a platform that I understand. So I definitely use that probably more than any other platform. And you can still do fun stuff with it, like take people to your bee yard safely is always, you know, a really nice thing. And I think people are always really interested in that. They're interested in the process. So sharing those things is fantastic. You know, in terms of like strategies for social media, from what I understand, like TikTok is what's up. That's what's the game, right?
It really is interesting to sort of watch the progression of how social media is used, and you know, how different businesses use social media, and the tone of their, you know, the material that they use in their you know, what information they're putting out there. Yeah, and you know, I think, as I said, you know, the way people use social media, and you know, the tone that they set, and you know, a day in the life, and being true, and you know, looking vulnerable, and those kinds of things, right? I think that has a general appeal to folks. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for participating. Thank you to Kelly for sharing some of that Foodland information with us. And as was posted in the chat, please fill out the evaluation. And next Tuesday, October the 4th, is our final session, and we're talking about getting it on the shelf. And so we're going to talk about how people have, you know, how they got into different forms of selling retail, and other avenues. So looking forward to seeing you next week, and thank you very much for your time tonight, and have a great rest of your evening.